Three, two, one. Joe Brady from Scanner. And I must get this right. It's Scanner 1979 if you do a search. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you go to Facebook, if you do Scanner 1979, we'll come up. But we do that because, for one thing, 1979 was the year we started the band. And also there's a German speed metal band called Scanner. And then also an electronica musician from, I believe he's from the UK. He's called Scanner as well. So we need
okay. So 1979, I mean, that is that like the height of punk?
Yeah, actually, it was sort of an in-between time because actually 76, or even a little earlier, you had the Stooges, and then you had the Ramones come out in the U.S., and then I guess 77 was big in the U.K. for, that's when the Pistols and everybody really came on the scene. So by 79, we were sort of in between that first wave of, what was officially dubbed punk rock, and then wave number two, which came around 1980, which was all the hardcore and the metal crossover stuff like the Exploited and GBH and things like that. So we were sort of caught in the middle, which was it's kind of an interesting thing for us because we weren't lumped in with the traditional punk rock or the hardcore. So we were kind of and then we had a lot of classic rock influence as well in our stuff. So it was a little more rock and roll. But with a punk, the punk edge. Yeah,
because I know off air or in SME Fusion, the chat, we've talked about the crossover between punk and rock and metal. Punk in the beginning was straightforward punk. There wasn't anything sort of crossover. When did the crossover start? Was it the mid 80s?
Yeah, probably the early 80s because, like I said, you had around 1980 and 81, you had bands like Exploited and GBH and the English Dogs and bands like that come out, and they were punk, but they were a harder edge, more of a speed type music, and then that crossed more into the metal area as they grew and they wanted to expand out a little bit, and of course metal was the obvious way to branch out because if you're punk and you're this really hard, fast stuff, and then as you develop your skills, you probably it seems logical you'd start going more into the metal realm.
Right. And for you, when did you first hear punk, or what were your roots in music? But let's go there first.
My roots in music were country and 50s music because when I was growing up, we would have local carnivals, and a lot of times they'd have these fishing games, and one of the regular prizes you win were 45 records. And I'd always get these Hank Williams 45s and Dion and the Belmonts. This is the early to mid 60s, so that stuff was still pretty big. So that was the stuff that I really liked. And as a matter of fact, when I first picked up a guitar, the first song I learned was Runaway by Del Shannon. So that was
absolute classic 50s. Was that 50s or 60s?
Yeah, I think that song was 61 or 62.
Okay, classic, absolute classic.
Right.
So,
and then
you just basically went from how does one go from 50s, 60s classic straight into punk?
Well, I guess it wasn't straight into punk because there was a whole evolution there. I had an older brother and he had friends, and they were bringing home records in the late 60s. The early Alice Cooper group stuff, and Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, and I was starting to hear that stuff as well. And then by the time it got into the 70s, then it was of course the Stooges, and David Bowie was a big influence as well. And it just expanded from there. And then a lot of the music, a lot of the early punk stuff still had almost a rockabilly sound to it. It was just it was revved up and a lot harder, but still used the same chord progressions as as a lot of the older rockabilly and 50s music.
Talking of rockabilly, Brian Setzer, does he still play?
Yeah, he still plays. As a matter of fact, he's done some live streaming in recent months, he was doing he got involved in more big band type music over the last decade or so.
Right.
And he'd do a big Christmas concert every year with his big band. So yeah, he's pretty active still.
Okay, great. So why start a band then? Was it just purely the influence and things happening around you?
Oh yeah, it's like the beginning of any music scene. it's exciting at that time when it first starts. I mean, I always imagine that's the way it was in the 50s when rock and roll first came on. It was super exciting. It was an electric feeling out there. In the same way when punk started. And I was always the type of person, I wasn't satisfied with just being a listener and going to shows. I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted to, you know, actually play. So, and I knew some people, and our guitar player, Junie Fortney, you know, he and I had the same musical tastes and everything, and we happened by chance to meet up. We were in a very rural area, but somehow we got hooked up, and I can't even remember how we met, but it went from there. We just started putting these songs together, and we were super stoked about the whole punk thing, and thought that would be the, you know, the most fun way to go out there and play, because we weren't really into being, you know, super highly technical musicians or playing like the more progressive type music that was big in the 70s. You know, that we didn't like that, and we really loved the idea of punk, just going out there and giving them both barrels.
And the thing is, you're still doing it today.
Yeah, and we have, you know, I hate to use the word evolve because everybody, you know, but we have evolved out, you know, and done some weirder things, but we stuck true to the original, you know, stripped down rock and roll sound that we've always had. Yeah, and we still record. We don't play out as much because we're not living close by anymore. We've sort of moved on, but we still record, and then when we record, we play some gigs. And
do you mainly release singles, or do you go for the full album kind of vibe?
We've been going for albums and EPs over the past decade or so, and then recently we just released you know, just a couple of singles. And of course, with the COVID-19 thing and being in the house a lot, and I work from home, and I've been able to put together enough materials for probably another album or two.
well, that's good for us, because I know you know that I'm a big fan of It's a War. That to me is just like I don't know, it's like a big middle finger to the government kind of vibe to me. That's what it feels like, particularly from where we are in South Africa. Paint me a scene of what it's like in Pennsylvania in the 70s, because I'd imagine Pennsylvania wasn't very big on punk or anything like that.
Oh, absolutely. Where we were, it was in central Pennsylvania, and it was very, very rural, a lot of farms and everything, and there were a lot of bars as well. And of course, we lived near York, Pennsylvania, which was it was at the time the headquarters for Harley Davidson motorcycles. Okay. So we had this combination of bikers and rednecks and all of that around our area, but punk rock was just virtually unknown. They had no idea what it was or anything. You know, a lot of the bikers liked our stuff because of the aggressive, you know, revved up stuff, but we could barely get any gigs. You know, it was mostly people wanted to hear what they just heard on the jukebox,
right?
And they didn't want to hear anything unknown to them. And then original music was, you know, you barely could play through one original, and you know, people, I don't even know what that is. I don't want to hear that.
So what is it like now? Is it still the same, sort of very rural, or you know, is there scope for bands who are perhaps in the area to play at all the bars and so on?
Well, yeah, it's rural over in that area, but the music scenes have developed a lot. I mean, you know, they have a lot of punk shows over there now. You know, when we were playing, there were no punk shows. We had to create our own, rent out a fire hall or something, and occasionally get some bar gigs. But now, you know, they have some good shows, and they have a pretty good scene. You know, from about the mid-'80s on, after we had already, you know, tossed in the towel and thought, we're not going to do, you know, get anywhere with this. You know, all of a sudden, the punk scene became more and more accepted. And then, of course, that crossover that really made it more acceptable, you know, that more palatable to people, that the music wasn't as strange for them. So yeah, it's a lot better now. And of course, over around York, the band Live comes from York, and they made it pretty big. So
there's still hope.
Yeah, there's still hope. We're at an age though that we don't really have any aspirations that way. We're just doing it for fun and getting the music out there. And thank goodness for the internet and these radio stations that are online, because our stuff, you know, over the last 10 years has been heard by everybody all over the planet. We've gotten an incredible following. that we never had before. We just thought, it was just a lark, and that was all it was. But all of a sudden, within the last 10 years, it's big.
What point did you say, oh, that's enough?
Oh, probably around 1982.
Wow, okay.
We've been doing it for about 4 years, and we couldn't get gigs. And then, of course, right around 82 we were pretty close to Baltimore and Washington, D.C. The hardcore scene really
blew up,
with Minor Threat and Scream and all of them. But we just missed it. We were, like I said, we were in that in-between time where we missed that explosion of punk, the second wave, and we just hung it up for a while, and then later on decided to at least record, and then that's when we found our audience.
I'm actually wearing my Exploited t-shirt today because I was having this podcast with you, and I was thinking to myself, I have to put something punk on, because at heart, although I'm a metalhead and I love my hard rock and metal and so on, I am a punk at heart completely. My first taste of punk was okay, so let me paint a picture for you what it was like when I was growing up in the late, very early 80s in apartheid South Africa. There was no music allowed that wasn't censored. It had to be censored by the South African Broadcast Corporation, which is just makes me extremely angry. So we missed out on a lot of stuff, and because of that, we missed out on a lot of American punk and music, a lot of it. But what we did get was a lot of the European, in particularly the UK punk. Talking about even after the Sex Pistols had disbanded, and we only then got the Sex Pistols. We were so far behind everybody else. So, I mean, when I speak to someone like yourself or somebody abroad, it's hard for them to gauge what it was like for us. It was like living behind an iron wall or an iron curtain, although not Russia, but still, we were like, we couldn't get anything. And everything was on the black market or through friends that had traveled, that bought cassette tapes back. And the first thing I ever recall hearing that was punk was Billy Idol in Generation X and the Sex Pistols. So so I missed out on the whole American scene. So I was looking forward to this conversation a lot because of you and Scanner and SME Fusion Radio. I have now gone back and also Brian Kroll mentioned to me the Ramones. Now, in the last 2-3 days, I've been binging on the Ramones, The Damned, and Bad Brains. And I'm still trying to get used to Bad Brains. It is Bad Brains, isn't it? I think it is, yeah. And I'm just trying to get my head around Bad Brains because it's just so fucking insane. Because it's nothing clinical like the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols were extremely clinical in their recordings. It was almost not punk.
Right.
So for me, the Ramones sounds 50s, 60s rock. It doesn't sound like punk. Some of the earlier stuff like the 77s and those sort of stuff sounds punk. But how do you define what is punk?
Oh, it's really tough because you can blur that line of what is punk all the way back to the 50s. Because Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard could have been considered punk because they were outrageous and they did something that was totally against the grain of what was going on, even in rock and roll. Those guys. But move it up to when people started using punk, and I would say it started with Iggy and the Stooges and the Ramones in the U.S., and then shortly after that it was the Dead Boys as well, and then that second wave that came along, and like you were talking about the Bad Brains, they were from D.C. originally, and we'd seen them many times down there, and they were another one that broke down a lot of barriers. For one thing, being an all African American band, but they had a sound that was incredible, and then they threw a lot of reggae into their music as well. But then they had this super fast, incredibly hardcore sound to them, and so it's defining what is punk, where it began, and everything is pretty hazy, and it's a matter of opinion. But I always go back to the Ramones and and the Stooges was the
Yeah.
first big.
Because I'm surprised by the Ramones. Again, like I said, we missed out on so much here in South Africa, and for me to hear the Ramones only now, 2020, it's just makes me so angry because I missed out on so much. But I haven't missed out because I'm catching up to it now. Maybe I'm listening with better knowledge of music, and it's making me appreciate it now even more. But to me, they don't sound punk. They just sound like almost like a classic punk rock band, that kind of vibe. But the Sex Pistols for me were the antithesis of what punk is. And someone said to me the other day, "What is punk?" And it's actually Brian Cole. Said, "But what is punk?" And I'm like, "Well, it's an attitude, it's a lifestyle." And I thought, but is it though? I'm still struggling to define what punk is. It's not an attitude. It's not, or is it an attitude? I mean, you're a punk. You're in a punk band. Is it an attitude?
Well, it's a lot of it is an attitude, but it's a style of music as well. I mean, there's like you said, the Sex Pistols were a band that, I mean, they were essentially a very gritty, loud and thick rock and roll band with a snarly singer, and that snarliness was what people identified as punk.
Right.
And the Ramones didn't have that. The Ramones were a sped up, stripped down rock and roll band, and Joey Ramone, tried to sing, and he tried to sing like a 50s and 60s pop singer on this, this rock background of, very fast music.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the punk thing, most people, I would say they see somebody like Johnny Rotten with the snarling and that very aggressive attitude, and that's what people do associate with punk more than the music style. But it's a little bit of both. It's a mixed bag of ingredients. You can't really nail down one thing, because it definitely is an attitude. Because our attitude when we started was, we wanted to play something that nobody else around our area was playing. Everybody was playing cover rock, cover tunes from classic rock bands and everything, and we wanted to go in there and just blast out this punk rock. And we didn't really have any goal in mind. We didn't think we were going to change anybody and change your music taste, but it was just fun. It was plain fun to just go out there and go crazy with this new kind of music. And it is big. Attitude is a big part of it.
Would you say that when you were starting Scanner, you were thinking, okay, we're going to start a punk band and sign up to a label or something?
No, there weren't any. there was no way to even sign up to a label. We knew that kind of music wasn't going to make it at all.
Right.
As far as commercially successful, it was more of just a fun thing to do. But we did start to get an audience, and we started, we were playing out more, around 1980, and so that was a lot of fun. But we knew we weren't going to be commercially successful and be signed by any record label. It was just our thing to do. It was a project.
Right.
A fun project, yeah.
So with punk comes clothes and crazy hair. Did you don any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, we were into the boots and tucking the boots into our jeans and acid washing the jeans and all that stuff, but we were and I was influenced by the Oi scene a lot, so I really gravitated toward that, with the tie-dyed shirt, not tie-dyed, multicolored shirts, but
yeah.
Shirts, and then boots and braces and things like that. That was my big thing. And Junie, our guitar player, he was more influenced by the glam side of, the David Bowie kind of thing, and also combining that with the more flamboyant punk scene.
Okay. So the latest from Scanner is Witch's Moon. Is that correct?
Yeah, that came out at the same time as Sideshow Train, actually.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So who's responsible for recording and writing all these materials?
I generally write all the songs, come up with the ideas and everything. I'm sort of the driving force as far as creating the music, and I put them together with my bass. I come up with an idea, then put the music together on my bass, and then these days I'll record it and make a video of me playing it and send it to the other members of the band, to get the structure down.
Yeah.
To record. But yeah, and it's as you know, there's a lot of weird ideas in some of our music. You know, a lot of horror type stuff. I'm a big horror movie fan.
Yep, and we're going to touch on that now because every single day I go on Facebook, there is Joe and his old, is it 40s, 50s classic horror?
Yeah, generally the classic horror stuff. Yeah, that's the stuff I really like.
I remember some of the stuff from the 70s and 80s. We, like I said, we never got anything sort of current. We always got everything delayed. And I remember watching, and I remember the movie very well. It's Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that cinematography and the stop motion and everything is just amazing. I remember just looking at the TV, my eyes as big as saucers, and just thinking, what the hell am I watching? This is insane. These things are real, and you know, and I was only a young kid at the time. But where did this love for horror or classic sci-fi come from?
Well, that's another thing that's hard to define. I mean, some people gravitate toward that, and others don't. You know, I grew up in a house with 4 brothers, and I was the only one that really grabbed a hold of that stuff and got into it. And they saw the same things that I did on TV. You know, late night TV. There would be movies on, and at the time they were. This was the early to mid '60s. They were also releasing these model kits of all the classic movie monsters.
Yeah. And you collect them now, or you still do collect them?
Yeah, I have my collection, mostly of the ones I had when I was a kid, and I occasionally buy some reissues. But, you know, they were a big deal when you would go into a hobby shop and you'd see this incredible art on the box, the cover of these boxes, and then be able to put together this kit and paint it up. That was huge back then because there was nothing else out there for people. But then all of a sudden, the manufacturers the toy manufacturers got wind of it, that this was very successful. So they started really making all kinds of wild stuff for us back then. So I just got into it. I got into Star Trek and everything growing up through it. I just loved all that stuff.
Kids nowadays will be listening to this going, what the hell is he talking about?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't try to tell anybody, oh, this was the best stuff in the world or anything, but on the other hand, our imaginations took over where, you know, budgets couldn't take us. Of course, you mentioned Jason and the Argonauts. Those kinds of movies, the Ray Harryhausen movies, really did bring super high quality effects and movies in general to us, and we just love that kind of stuff. Even though, you know, they can do so much more with computer generated special effects these days.
Oh, you see, now I have an issue with that. You know, it sounds like an old person moaning now, but the old classic, maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's just a vintage thing, but the old classics just stand up so much better than what can be done today.
I think so. I think there's more atmosphere. Some of these older, even like the 30s and 40s movies, just, you know, having to shoot black and white made them keenly aware of lighting and atmosphere. So you see these movies like the original King Kong, the original Dracula and Frankenstein. They had an atmosphere that you can't duplicate today. Everything is so super slick. And, you know, if you have a monster that just raises his hand to go pick something up, he doesn't just raise his hand. He does all kinds of flourishes and, you know, skin flaps and everything moving because they can do it. They can do it with computer generated, but it almost takes the dreamlike quality out of a movie. And
touching on that now, we're talking about technology. Technology in music, has that affected Scanner in any way other than you know, the ability to record and send during COVID-19 and things like that?
I'd say the biggest thing technology-wise is our exposure to a wider audience. That's the thing that made it so big for us, because we still record essentially the same way we always have, almost all live with very few, you know, overdubs and you know, punching in mistakes and things like that, fixing mistakes. We don't do that much. You know, we try to make it as live as possible. So that hasn't really changed all that much. What has changed is the ability to release something and have it instantly reviewed and seen all over the planet. I just love that.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely insane what that's enabled a lot of people to do, but it's also enabled a lot of people that should perhaps not be making music, that are making music.
Oh yeah, anybody could set up a little mini studio that can make incredible effects and do the most complex mixing and everything, but then if you have, crappy material, it's not going to do anything other than irritate people because you have to wade through so much crap to get it to anything that's any good.
Yeah.
So much.
So Scanner, has it always been a 3-piece?
Yeah, well, we went through a short period where we were 4-piece. We had 2 basses. I was playing bass. I play bass sort of like Lemmy from Motorhead plays bass, almost like a rhythm guitar. It's dirty and and almost like a rhythm guitar. And then we had a bass player who played more conventional bass for a while, and that sounded pretty cool because it's a very thick and heavy sound live when we play out at bars. But for the most part, it was always a 3-piece band. I do vocals and bass, Junie on guitar, and we have a drummer.
So what happens with doing live shows that you don't do that anymore?
I wouldn't say we don't do it anymore. If we do a release, then we'll do some live shows around a release because we'll already be rehearsed and ready to go. But who knows with the COVID-19 thing, when anything like that will happen again. But we're still going to record, and we're still going to create this Scanner sound for a while anyway.
So how is the whole isolation lockdown in Pennsylvania going?
Well, I guess for some people it's definitely a hardship. For me, like I said before, fortunately I can do my job 100% from home. I work for a software company, so everything that I do can be remote, so it hasn't really affected me that much, and our business is doing fairly well. But if you're a waiter at a restaurant or working in a retail store, you're although they've done a lot for people as far as unemployment insurance and everything. They've funded it so that they get a lot of extra money. Some people are making more money now than they were as a waiter. So
wow, jeepers.
I think hopefully that it lasts at least long enough to get out of this thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, any clue when your lockdown's going to end?
No, well, we're in this 3-stage thing where it was red, which means everything's locked down, yellow, which means everything's kind of partially open, and then green will mean everything's open. So in Pennsylvania, we're divided up into counties. So some counties are in yellow and some are still in red. I don't think we have any green yet.
Okay, and any cases?
Oh yeah, we have. In the Pittsburgh area where I live, we have about 1,000 cases.
Wow.
Yeah, but relatively low death rate though.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not been too bad in Pennsylvania.
So what's the future for Scanner then? If this COVID carries on for another couple of months or lockdown or whatever, what is the future for Scanner? What can you do to sort of like break that COVID lockdown?
We can still record. We can still put songs together. And I have the person who did our mixing. His name is Ken. If I send our wave files to him, he can mix it all together. Even though we do it all separately, he can pull it together. Since it's only 3 instruments, it's not too bad. As a matter of fact, that's pretty much what we did with Witch's Moon and Sideshow Train. I just sent the files to him and he mixed it. So we could still do that. We could release new music.
Technology, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. That's the big thing. And that's the most important thing anyway to me anymore. Outside, I'm not that big into playing at bars and nightclubs, unless Iggy Pop calls. We'll go on tour with him. But
yeah, of course you will. Yeah,
exactly. But other than that, we're perfectly satisfied just making new music, recording, and releasing it out there.
And all the artwork is because I know you've done you do some drawings and stuff like that, don't you?
Yeah, I pretty much do the artwork for the covers of our CDs.
Okay, and the green skeleton, is that a graphic or is that a drawing?
It was a drawing that I took into Photoshop and
wow.
And touched it up. I did a drawing of the skeleton at first, and then.
And of course, you work with computer software, so you're pretty adept at that.
Yeah, I do a lot of artwork, but I always like to start with my hand, by hand, drawing the thing with a pencil, and then scan it in, and then do manipulation. I still like to have that tactile relationship with the artwork.
Do you do that prior to writing a song or after?
Oh yeah, after we write, do this music and have all the songs finished off, I'll save the artwork for last for the
right.
album.
So you do this. You're the singer and bassist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So why did you get into singing?
Oh, I don't know. Probably because I was writing the songs, I probably felt that nobody else could do them right. So I just did them. And I always liked Alice Cooper, and I always tried to, I figured if Alice Cooper could sing with that gritty voice and be successful and have people like his music, then I should be okay, because that's more my style. It's not, I'm not a sing-song singer. I'm more of the raspy, gritty kind of singing.
Now on Bandcamp, I've seen that on one of the album covers, you got Boneyard Boogie by Joe Scanner Brady. Is that a side thing?
Yeah, that was just a solo thing I did with my son, who did some of the instrumentation in it, but I did the bass and vocals, and we pulled it together. It was just
okay, so he's following in the footsteps then.
Yeah, right.
Oh dear. Now you know what your dad must have felt like, eh?
Right. Yeah. Well, my parents would have nothing to do with this stuff, with the stuff we were doing. They just thought it was like speaking Martian to them, because they were traditional. They were into traditional Grand Ole Opry country kind of stuff, and here I was doing this wild, it's a war kind of stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to say, how did the parents react to the whole sort of like, I'm going to start a band and it's going to be punk?
Yeah, well, I was a kid I was working from the time I was about 13, and I could buy the equipment with my own money, and I wasn't into any really bad habits outside of playing in a punk band, so nobody really had a problem with me doing what I wanted.
So give us a rundown of the rig that you play on.
Right now, I have an Eastman bass. It's the one you probably see pictures of me all the time. It's a green special edition that they put out a few years ago. It's my favorite instrument ever. And I just play on an acoustic studio bass amp.
Okay.
I usually play on a PV amp.
Okay. My brother, he plays bass. He's got a PV. Loves it.
Oh yeah, you can't beat. In my opinion, you can't beat PV for bass amps for live play. But in the house and in the studio, I think PV can overwhelm a studio. So
you're saying earlier that you like to sort of like play together and record live and all that sort of stuff. Do you prefer that method rather than sitting in a room with headphones on, all isolated, and trying to come up with something and send it off to somebody else who then adds over it and so on? Yeah,
I'll do it that way, especially now in these days. But generally, we like to just play the stuff, and then if we need to go over with lead guitars or something like that, we do that. But the vast majority, we just play through the song live and record it that way. Have everything mic'd up and just record it live. Any
hints on what's coming next?
Let's see. I have a few songs that are all kind of more. Actually, they're leaning more into the gothy kind of sound.
Ooh, okay.
That love of horror kind of thing. So it's more. We've done the punk thing over and over and over. I mean, how many times can you do that?
Yeah.
So, we do that, and then also I'm in this group in Pittsburgh called the Losers After Midnight. They're more of a horror rock / rockabilly kind of band, and we've released an album with that group too. So I'm working on some pieces with them right now as well.
Okay, cheapers. So you're busy.
Yeah, it's good. It's good in this atmosphere of lockdown to have some creative projects.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time out to chat to me. It's such a short amount of time, but I could talk punk until I can't breathe anymon. But
there's a lot to talk about.
There's too much to talk about. That's the problem.
Yeah, right. So, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, and happy Memorial Day in the USA today. So, what do you do on Memorial Day?
Try to have as relaxing a weekend as I possibly can, because I'll be going back to work the day after. So,
ouch!
Kick back and relax.
Yeah. That's it. Joe Brady from Scanner, 1979. People, description below. Everything will be in the description below, so you can click on all the links and go and find out what Joe's up to. Joe, thank you so much for chatting to us, and keep well and be safe.
Okay, you too, Trev. Thanks.
Alrighty. Cheers, Joe.
Okay, bye.